Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I am Kathryn, and it is race week again. For the last time, for a while. Obviously, new background, new portion of my living room that we're going to be podcasting out of as part of the Going Off Track podcast studio. Still a work in progress. I'm going to work on that during the F1 spring break because, that's coming after this weekend, which is still weird. Obviously, we know why it's happening, and I have the full breakdown up here. I never remember which hand. So it is up in a corner that you are going to be watching on YouTube. But anyway, we're going to start off today's episode with a little something that I was going to do in a full episode on its own. And I was waiting for some other news to break that hasn't broken yet. You'll see in a minute. But what we're going to talk about is what I'm not so fondly calling is Aston Martin okay episode 2 of who knows how many episodes we're going to get by the end of the season. If you have not seen episode 1 of Is Aston Martin okay, which I filmed after the testing weekends, you can watch that linked above wherever that link is. And gosh, it just seems like such a mess. Late last year, back in November, we got the announcement that Aston Martin, who cycles through team principals pretty regularly, almost I would say worse than Ferrari, who has known to have like a 3-year maximum on most of its team principals, give or take a couple, which we break down in our F1 team genealogy series. But Aston Martin has basically gone through like a team principal per year or less, that is definitely a lot. But in that same tradition, Adrian Newey, who has had the job for all of 4 months now, he was announced back in November as to be taking over the team principal role, and he is out as team principal at Aston Martin after 2 whole races, which is not to say that he is leaving Aston Martin, which most of Aston Martin's team principals haven't actually left the team since, the days of Otmar Safnauer, who is trying to bring a new team into Formula One, but that's not a story for right now. And going back to his job as technical director, which is really his that's where he is best needed right now, considering all of the myriad of issues going on with the car, whether it's the fact that they're 4 seconds off the pace or that they're vibrating so badly it's breaking Fernando Alonso's hands off, and also Lance Stroll. So that is part 1 of the news that broke last week. Part 2 is Jonathan Wheatley, who also lasted as team principal for Audi for 2 whole races, is also leaving for personal reasons, which the decision to leave Audi to take a job perhaps at Aston Martin in the same role is indeed a very personal decision. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second. But this all started really weird for me, the Aston Martin Adrian Newey news. And it wasn't even something that I looked too closely at during the Chinese Grand Prix, which was that Adrian Newey wasn't actually in China. And team principals typically don't go to every race, but it did stand out as weird once people pointed it out because, brand new car, brand new regulation, the car is bad, where is the car whisperer type of deal. And all of a sudden he's not there. So that was a little weird. And then after the Chinese Grand Prix, Mike Crack, who was the team principal before Andy Cowell, who was the team principal before Adrian Newey, who is, like I said, still at Aston Martin, basically said, no, it was always the plan for him not to attend every race every season. Like I said, there are team principals who don't. Toto Wolff, very notably, does not go to every race anymore because he's been doing it forever and he has people who can handle that for him now. But it was still kind of strange because, yes, team principals don't go to every race all the time. They have a designated representative who can do the team principal stuff for them, unless your name is Flavio Briatore and you literally are not licensed to be a team principal, even if you say you are, which is another throwback to last year. But when your car is as bad as it is, and when your PR is as bad as it is, your team principal's not going to be at your race. That was kind of strange. And then they announced that he was stepping down a couple days later from the team principal role, and all was revealed, and all now makes sense that he is exclusively focusing on the technical matters, which totally fine, makes sense. So then the real question is, who is going to replace him? Enter Jonathan Wheatley, the team principal at Audi, who announced within hours that he was going to be leaving Audi for personal reasons, like I had said. And the thing about Jonathan Wheatley is him taking the team principal job at Audi back when it was still Sauber and they announced that he was going to be leading them through the transition, is that it came at a time in Jonathan Wheatley's career where he had really maxed out on upper level growth in the company at Red Bull. If you don't remember that he was the sporting director at Red Bull for a long time. And at that point, like there was no next step in the company because Christian Horner was never going to go anywhere. And then he did, but that's an entirely unrelated story. But Jonathan Wheatley did what most people do at all companies, and especially in sports teams, when you hit an upper limit at an organization, you go to another one to get your promotion. And that's what Jonathan Wheatley did. He moved to Switzerland for a year and a half, 2 years. He got really in with the team. But the thing is that there was still somebody above him with the same experience that he had in Mattia Binotto, who came on after a little bit of a leadership transition, shenaniganery, some leadership changes at the top level at Audi. And then Mattia Binotto came on to take over and is basically now the head of the Audi project for Formula One. And that's all great and all, except that meant that Jonathan Wheatley then just moved back down to the hierarchy, not to the same level that he was when he was back at Red Bull, but basically the same difference. So that caused, I'm sure that he wasn't necessarily thrilled with that. And there were reports that he wasn't necessarily gelling with Binotto, and Binotto's like very politically connected into what's going on at Audi as a company. And it led to some friction. We can assume from the reports that I've been seeing. And now Binotto, our favorite former Ferrari team principal who enjoys driving through the Italian countryside with Gunther Steiner, is back in F1 as a team principal, which is good for him, exciting. The question is when is Aston Martin / Jonathan Wheatley going to announce that Jonathan Wheatley is taking over as team principal, which may or may not go well for him considering the longevity of team principals at Aston Martin, which is almost as bad as the longevity of team principals at Alpine, which, if you don't remember, Alpine has fired its team principal at Spa basically almost every season, with the notable exception being last year because Flavio Briatore was pretending to do it, but that's a whole other bag of cats. So that's a real big question for when that's going to be announced, especially at such a, like I said, such an important time for Aston Martin to show that they're not as much of a mess as they think they are, that we think they are, which we know they are, which the car needs to stop trying to break Fernando Alonso's hands off. His partner just had a baby. He needs to be able to hold the baby with his hands. But anyway, that is Aston Martin. They are not okay, which is the grand scheme of things is they are not okay. Lance Stroll was caught talking to someone in the media saying that they need prayers for this weekend in Japan, which is kind of a big yikes because they're bringing upgrades this week because Honda is right down the road. If you don't remember, Honda is Aston Martin's engine manufacturer this season after Aston Martin moved from Mercedes, leaving Mercedes an opportunity to take Alpine and kill Renault. But anyway, there's a lot of lore that comes in Formula One. Aston Martin is not okay. Like, are they okay? No. Anyway, let's flash it back to last year in Japan. Last year in Japan was kind of a bummer of a race, considering Japan is one of my favorite races on the calendar, which, has been known to happen, but we like excitement. And this did give us one bit of very interesting information that we didn't realize until way after the fact. So the podium for that race was a Max win, a Lando P2, and an Oscar P3. And I think that honestly, the most notable part of the weekend that most people remember is that the grass kept catching fire. Like I literally had to pull up my notes from last year's episode and say, what the hell did we even talk about? Which honestly, I still don't remember, but you can watch the reaction to the 2025 race up here, wherever the heck that link is, and go from there. But it was also the first race of the season where we kind of didn't realize at the time that there was writing on the wall in regards to McLaren's favoritism for Lando over Oscar, where Oscar could have used an opportunity to try to get at Max because we knew that the McLaren was the stronger, better car compared to the Red Bull, but they refused to let them switch places even temporarily for Oscar to try because they would have rather let Lando finish a race in P2 than Oscar finish a race in P1. And we all know how that turned out. And we all know that it's going to be bad this year too. Well, if Oscar can even get a Grand Prix racing lap in, which we will see this weekend, because Lord knows that boy needs to race in a car in a non-sprint race capacity. Anyway, but that was 2025. And now going to 2026, we actually had some big news break. This, as I'm recording, it was about 15 hours ago. This news broke in the morning in Japan on Friday. It is currently Thursday in my part of the United States. But the FIA and Formula One announced some I would call them pretty significant energy management changes for qualifying. Like I said, this was announced this morning, which is kind of late in the game considering how it's race weekend. We're here. We're now. It's happening. So I have the statement. I'm going to read the statement and then I'm going to explain the statement a little bit. So the statement from the FIA reads, following discussions between the FIA, F1 teams, and power unit manufacturers, a minor adjustment to energy management parameters for qualifying at the Japanese Grand Prix has been agreed with unanimous support of all power unit manufacturers, which are Honda, Red Bull, Ford, Mercedes, Audi, Ferrari. I think that's all of them. I'm pretty sure that's all of them. I think there are 5. If I'm forgetting someone, I'm sorry. And I'm forgetting someone, oops. Anyway, to continue, to ensure that the intended balance between energy deployment and driver performance is maintained, the maximum permitted energy recharge for qualifying this weekend has been reduced from 9 megajoules to 8 megajoules. This adjustment reflects feedback from drivers and teams who have emphasized the importance of maintaining qualifying as a performance challenge. We can all agree that that's true. We don't want Mercedes to just run away with every qualifying now, do we? The FIA notes that the first events under the 2026 regulations have been operationally successful. Okay. And this targeted refinement is part of the normal process of optimization as the new regulatory framework is further validated in real-world conditions. The FIA, together with the F1 teams, power unit manufacturers, continue to embrace evolutions to energy management with further discussions scheduled in the coming weeks. So, what the heck does that even mean? Well, it means that the drivers will have to harvest less energy to charge the battery on the straights during qualifying, which in turns mean that they will spend less time on park throttle and perform less lifting and coasting. So that means that we are going to have more vroom car going fast during qualifying on the straights, which I have talked about in previous episodes regarding our concerns about batteries. Does an F1 car have enough battery to make a full push lap? And the answer so far has been no. So right now we are having the FIA, all the teams, all the power unit manufacturers have agreed to make the cars take less energy to charge the batteries so that when a driver is doing their warm-up laps, whether they're doing, 1 or 2 cool, prep laps before their push lap, they are getting more of that energy faster and without less battery usage so that they can have enough battery to have a full lap at full throttle instead of lifting and coasting to try to preserve battery life during qualifying, where like the actual point of qualifying is to go as fast as humanly possible. And we have seen in every qualifying so far, of which there have been 3 qualifying sessions, that all of the qualifying sessions have been between 1 and 3 seconds slower than the 2025 qualifyings. And there's obviously always going to be a little bit of difference, especially going from like the first race of the year, one year, to the first race of the year to the next. But it is nice to see that they are making those adjustments. We love adjustments. So this should hopefully mean a more competitive qualifying, especially in light of the fact that we are going to have more teams bringing upgrades. Like I said, Aston Martin will be bringing changes to their power unit. Red Bull is also bringing upgrades. I think other teams are going to be bringing upgrades as well. So we'll really have an opportunity to see what the teams have done over the last 2 weeks, because obviously there's really not much you can do going from one race to another when the races are back-to-back weekends. So what have the teams been able to do over these past 2 weeks in order to improve their cars after we've gotten the baseline of what we have seen in Australia and China? And of course, does this actually mean anything at all in light of the fact that after this race, we are going to have 4 weeks off for the teams to all go home. Obviously, this isn't like a typical spring break in August where everything shuts down. So what are the teams, what changes that the teams make in these 2 weeks versus the teams are going to make in the next 4 weeks going into Miami, which is definitely not where you want to have your clean slate, but whatever. What is that going to do for the Formula One season as a whole? Are these 3 races going to be a mulligan? We don't know. I think so, but we'll see. Now, going into free practices, we are going to have our first appearance of a rookie driver in a free practice session this weekend in FP1. And if you don't remember, every driver has to give up their seat twice a season unless you are currently a rookie. So right now, Arvid Lindblad is the only driver on the grid who does not have to give up his seat because technically he fulfilled the requirement of a rookie driver driving in free practice 1 twice in a season during FP1 in Australia and FP1 in China. So he doesn't have to do it. Every other driver on every team does. So Max has to step out of the car twice. Isaac Hadjar has to step out of the car twice. Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, everyone has to step out of the car twice. Arvid Lindblad already did it for himself. And so the first appearance that we are seeing this weekend is Jak Crawford, who's a reserve driver at Aston Martin, will be driving for Fernando Alonso. And now this is kind of interesting. Teams have to be very intentional about where they put their free practice 1 drivers because there are only so many good places for rookie drivers to have free practices in. And obviously, Fernando Alonso has been in Formula One for about 800 years. So it's okay that he misses a single practice session at the Japanese Grand Prix because he's been at the Japanese Grand Prix more times than Jak Crawford has been alive, probably, give or take. So that makes a little bit of sense, but also at the same time, considering how bad the car is, do you want to have your senior driver out of the car, especially when they're bringing in upgrades and changes? And B, do you really want to put a rookie in a car that is this bad and is a car that's trying to give the drivers nerve damage? So I think it's a really interesting choice to do it right now. This isn't like when Red Bull puts in a Yuma Iwasa into the F1 car in Japan because he's a Japanese driver and they love having, we love seeing Japanese drivers driving in Japan. But it's you can make the argument of getting it out of the way, and you can also make the argument of they need Fernando to be in the car as much as possible because the other driver is Lance Stroll. So there's a lot of questions there. Well, I guess, is it really going to matter because Aston Martin is 4 seconds behind the pace? No, it really doesn't matter. But these are other things to think about, or things that I am overthinking about, as one tends to do. Now, moving on, let's talk about liveries, because we love a special livery, and we have 3 special liveries coming in this week at the Japanese Grand Prix. Number 1, the most Japanese, let's call it the most Japanese of them all, is Haas released their Godzilla collaboration through their season-long partnership with Toho Company Limited, which is the studio that owns the Godzilla movies. So the reason why we have 800 Godzilla movies a year is because of this company, and now we have Godzilla on the F1 car. I think it's pretty cool. Obviously, it's really fun. Obviously, Godzilla has broken Japan many a times. So let's put it on a car that's going to go really fast. At the same time, I like it. And I tend to really like the Haas livery, especially since they've gone back to their white liveries. But I do feel a little bit that the Godzilla, where they placed Godzilla on the car, and obviously there's only so much bodywork to put a giant monster on top of, which we'll talk about room on bodywork in a second. But I think that it does get a little bit lost in the TGR branding, which is Toyota Gazoo Racing. So it gets a little bit lost in the rest of the livery. It blends really well, but I don't think that you're really going to notice when the car is driving very fast on track on TV for the 5 seconds that we see a shot of Ollie Behrman driving really quickly compared to the regular Haas car that we see week in, week out. So they didn't do a bad job, but it just doesn't stand out. It's fine. I give it a B-. Love a Godzilla collab. Wish I could see more of him. And to play on wish I could see more of. Let's talk about the Mercedes special livery. It is wolf inspired, but not Toto wolf inspired. But here's the problem that I have with this livery. This livery is a front wing decoration, and that's it. Look at it right here. They even announced it as it is just the front wing. So like A for effort, but you stopped after the first third of the car, and there's so much car left that you could have decorated like a freaking wolf, but you didn't. And as Emily would say all the time, thousands of people had to approve this. And obviously it's really cheap to just switch out a front wing and redecorate a front wing compared to redecorating an entire car. But when you're going all in on, fancy special livery, fancy race suits, which I'll talk about the race suits in a second, where you only change the front wing of the car. It's like on the Godzilla livery with Haas, like you're not going to see the wolf win the Mercedes, that we are going to see all of the time this weekend. Like the Mercedes will dominate the broadcast, but you're not going to see that on TV. Like it's just the front wing. And then the race suits look like somebody took a dried paintbrush to them, which is the most generous way that I could describe the race suits that I have seen, which is not very wolf-like. It's like, white fur, black fur, and the black fur blends in with the fact that the Mercedes race suits are black anyway. But I say that it misses the mark. I give it a C-, especially due to the fact that they really fumbled the ball on the livery. Like if you look at the race suits, like the race suits are not my favorite. They're not a cup of tea of mine, but at the very least they did a full body thing. Whereas, like I said, the livery is just the front of the car. I don't love it. But speaking of liveries that I do love and always love, VCARB came out with another killer. This isn't my all-time favorite livery of theirs. I think the Miami livery from a couple of years ago, and the jeans livery and the sparkle livery. I love all the VCARB liveries, but this is a beautiful cherry blossom inspired livery. Obviously, VCARB Racing Bulls, they've had very close connections to Japan for so long, especially through Red Bull's partnership with Honda, which I think really showed itself more in the VCARB side of the relationship compared to the Red Bull side of the relationship. Obviously, it was there for both, but I feel like it was a lot more forward on the VCARB side, and they're continuing with that even though Honda is not a partner of Red Bull anymore. The cherry blossom inspired car, it's pretty. It's, everything that is blue is now red for the weekend, but it's nice. It's a really nice, well done livery that covers the whole car. See, is really not that hard, Mercedes. Whole car. Oh, come on. It's like I said, not that difficult. Anyway, let's talk about the weather this weekend in Suzuka. Now, I have a bone to pick with weather. When Formula One announces the weather versus when I Google weather in race location, and the weather reports are like completely different. But when I Googled the weather for Suzuka, Japan for this weekend, it said that the most chance of rain, if that, is going to be on Saturday. Whereas when Formula One announced the weather from wherever weather station that they get their weather from, it says that there's a 25% chance of rain on Sunday. I'm going to throw it out there that I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a dry race weekend. I don't foresee there being any actual weather that we're going to have to be dealing with. I could be wrong, but I'm probably not going to be in this case, at least. I was wrong once, I think last year in Baku, but we're not going to talk about that one. Now, let's get into my predictions. As you know, I predict pole, podium, and P10, and also biggest surprise and who's going to do it each weekend. I also give myself points because I like that validation, and also this is very difficult and I'm not very good at it. So for pole, I am picking that guy, Kimi Antonelli. Did you know that I was in his documentary? That documentary, The Seat. You should watch it. I'm picking Kimi Antonelli this week. I still think that even with these qualifying changes, that the Mercedes will still have a little bit more advantage, where I think that we're going to see most of the rest of the field stepping up a little bit more, but I still think that Mercedes will have the tiniest of edges still. I would like the Mercedes to step back. We'll see. But, the Mercedes power unit and the Mercedes car together are clearly showing a pretty good partnership compared to other Mercedes customer teams. So for our podium, I have picked a Kimi Antonelli win, so a repeat win, which I'm sure as soon as that happens, they will have a stat about the last time a first-time driver won back-to-back races. And so we'll see how long it's been since that happened. Was it Lewis? I don't know. I haven't actually looked. I'll look if it happens, or it will be told to me through the broadcast when it happens, told to all of us. And then I am going with a Charles Leclerc P2 and a George Russell P3. So we're having a nice Mercedes sandwich around a Ferrari middle, and we will see how things go. Obviously, the question is like, yes, Ferrari is doing well right now, but when are they going to start strategizing themselves into oblivion, which we all know is something that is very prone to happening all of the time. Now for P10, which is the last place where you score points, I give myself 3 points for that because it is very hard to pick. I am going with Carlos Sainz. You know, one of the things that we have seen the last couple of years, especially with the likes of the midfield teams or the lower midfield teams, Williams, Haas, you know, of the like, is the, you know, Audi even as well, is the consistency factors. Like you have a good race here, then you have a bad race here and a bad race here, and then a good race here, and then 3 more bad races. So I want to see more consistency out of the teams, which I think is a lot to ask for right now, especially with the reliability issues that the teams are working with. But I want to see Carlos Sainz back-to-back points. I also want to see Alex Albon in the points as well. It's been a minute. Now, for biggest surprise and who's going to do it, my original surprise was that the Red Bull upgrades were going to work to make the cars more competitive with the Mercedes and the Ferraris. But then F1 announced these new qualifying changes. So my new surprise of the week is that these qualifying changes are going to actually be good, and that the cars are going to be able to have push laps that will last the entirety of the length of the track. And my dumb of the week was also originally going to be that Ferrari is going to start fumbling the strategy and start strategizing themselves to death, which, as we know, is always going to be a risk. But I am switching and I'm going from that to an Audi fumble. I think that Audi is going to have, you know, they've had a mixed bag race in both race weekends, where Hülkenberg had a good weekend and then Gabriel Bortoleto had a good weekend, but it was never the two of them at the same time. And I think just in light of the recent upheaval, I think that we're going to see a little bit of a struggle from both cars this weekend. So that's going to be my dumb. Watch me be wrong, but you know, okay, whatever. Final thoughts for Japan is I'm excited for racing. Obviously, it's been 2 whole weeks, and this is going to be the last race to get us by for the next 4 weeks because of, you know, stuff. Whole episode did about it. It's down in the show notes if it's not in the cards. But I just, you know, like I said, this is going to be the last race for a while. And I think that it's going to be a really interesting indicator of, you know, what teams need to work on over the spring break and what differences are we going to see between teams from now, where we are now, and where we're going to see them in May. So I think that that's the real big question mark that we're going to see out of this. And I'm very interested to get to the after portion to see what changes are going to be made between races. So that's I think going to be the biggest thing to look out for. Obviously, up next, we'll have our reaction episode to the Japanese Grand Prix out probably on Monday, even though the race is on Saturday night. I'm probably going to get it out for you guys on Monday. But that's what I have for you today. Thank you for going off track with me, and I will see you in the next one.